Rula's drawers present. I, the docile one. I put the key in the lock, but the door wouldn't open. A short story inspired by Lebanon post-Civil War. Fates of Women. An original narrative written and produced by Rula Haj. Enjoy listening.
I live in a small room located on the terrace of an old building in Beirut. I live alone, yet I have a large family. If someone happens to drop by unannounced, I receive them outside on the terrace. I do not let anyone come in. No, I am not afraid, but I would end up comforting them, so sorry they would feel for me, and I no longer have the strength for that. 30 years ago, I lived in a large house, 3 kilometers as the crow flies from my room. In fact, I did not choose this room by chance. From my window, I can see the entrance to my former home and the large door where I remained for more than 2 hours, shouting and crying. I lived there with my husband, my 3 daughters, and 2 housemates. I met my husband 3 years before the end of the war, when I was 18, during a school outing. We were on a pilgrimage to Our Lady of Lebanon in Harissa in the month of May. As soon as we arrived and stepped off the bus, I noticed a young man staring at me. I felt with embarrassment that he was fixing his eyes on me. Twice I lifted my gaze and realized he had not stopped. He did not look away for a single instant. Then I saw that he was taking pictures of me. He had a camera around his neck. We prayed in the small church, then climbed the spiral staircase leading to the large statue of the Virgin Mary. The weather was beautiful that day. The view from the steps overlooked the valley, the Gulf of Junia, and the sea. From above, I saw him again. He stood in front of the church, lifting his head in my direction. Then, as we were coming down, I sensed at one moment that he was about to approach me, but we were well surrounded by the nuns and 2 of our teachers. He did not dare. Yet he followed me with his gaze, and through the lens of his camera, all the way to the bus. The next day, I saw him again in front of the school. He could not enter the grounds, but he watched me through the fence. I could not ignore his looks, which unsettled me, nor the clicking of his camera. No one had ever looked at me like that before. He waited for me every day in the same spot. Then one day, I saw him driving his car behind the bus. That is how he found out where I lived. And from then on, he waited for me every morning in front of our building and after school, always without a word. At the end of the school year, he approached me, showing me a very beautiful photograph of myself. To me, he was no longer a stranger. He invited me to a cafe. I followed him without thinking too much. He fascinated me and almost immediately wrapped me around his finger. I introduced him to my parents a few days later. 12 years separated us. The age gap worried my mother and my sister, but what truly troubled them was his total hold over me. They reproached me for following him blindly and always giving in to his wishes, without expressing my opinions, my desires, or my aspirations. I never said no to him. I could not. More out of submission than love, even in the most trivial matters of daily life. We married 3 years later, at the end of the war, after I had obtained my degree in education. He had bought a house in the same neighborhood as his parents, but we settled in Saudi Arabia, where he had the opportunity to open a large candle factory intended to supply the Middle East. The family factory in Lebanon was still managed by his father, with the help of his brother. In fact, when we crossed paths in Harissa, he was delivering candles. Thus, I distanced myself from my parents and my sister. I called them once a week, for only a few minutes. During summer vacations in Lebanon, I barely saw them, as I stayed most of the time with my in-laws in Beirut. I could only follow my husband's instructions. He decided that I would not work. I depended entirely on him. He wanted children immediately, preferably boys, but I had only girls. I, not we, because he held me responsible for not giving birth to the son or sons he wanted at all costs. When our 3rd daughter was born, it was too much for him. That was when everything shifted, though I did not realize it at the time. During that period, we had permanently returned to the country. However, he traveled frequently to finalize the sale of the factory and settle pending administrative matters. He asked his parents to keep an eye on us. They were almost always at my house. They had an opinion on everything, scolded the housemaids for nothing, criticized me endlessly, my clothes, the way I raised the girls, and monitored my every move. When my parents or friends came to visit, they would sit with us and speak in my place. Little by little, everyone grew tired of coming to my house, even my own mother. I was being suffocated, and I, the docile one, did not react, without a word. One Saturday morning, I woke with a start at 6 o'clock to the screams of one of the housemaids. It was my brother-in-law who had entered our home without warning, clearly using a key, because he had forgotten his jacket the day before. I decided to tell my husband about it on the phone. For the first time, I expressed my discomfort. To my great surprise, he seemed sympathetic and asked me to spend the weekend at my parents' house until he returned from his trip, alone without the girls, to decompress and change my surroundings. That is what I did. My sister, who was already married, joined me, and we spent 2 relaxed, carefree days together. On Monday at 7 a.m., I returned home as agreed. I put the key in the lock, but the door would not open. I tried a second time, then a third. Since the door still would not open, I rang the bell. No one came. I began to worry. I rang the intercom. I could hear it ringing, but no one answered. I shouted my husband's name. He replied from behind the door.
Go back to your parents. Our story is over.
I did not understand. I said to him,
Open the door, please. I went to my parents because you asked me to.
No, I didn't ask you anything. You decided to abandon your daughters and leave me. Go away.
Let me come in. I beg you. I'll do whatever you want. The girls need me.
I was in shock. I banged on the door like a madwoman, screaming. Then I heard my daughters crying and my husband's voice mingling with my mother-in-law's. I remained there for a long time, knocking, screaming, crying. Then he said firmly,
If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police. I've already started the divorce proceedings. Go away.
So I returned to my parents' house, completely devastated. My father tried in vain to contact my husband, my in-laws, and influential people so that I could return home to my daughters. But my husband was inflexible. He no longer wanted me. He had found someone else long before our third daughter was born. He had connections everywhere, and the best lawyers in Lebanon, who had built a file of lies against me. I, the docile one, had been turned into a bad wife and a bad mother. The divorce took place, accompanied by a restraining order forbidding me from approaching my daughters. The youngest was only 2 years old. And he remarried immediately and had the son he had dreamed of. I tried repeatedly, through friends, to get news of my daughters. Unfortunately, he had instructed everyone around him not to trust anyone. So I decided to follow them with my eyes and through the lens of my camera. I followed them from afar, without a word. I took photographs whenever I could, hiding behind the school fence, just as he used to do when I was 18. With those photographs, I covered the walls of my room, 1 wall per daughter. I have pictures from every age. In this way, I watched them grow up around me. Without a word, I, the docile one.
Thank you for listening. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to discover more tales and stories. See you soon.